Hello, readers and writers. I'm MJ, and today I'm talking about my thoughts on being an autistic author. In Between is my first published book. I wrote this book with an autistic female main character who is a single parent because female representation, especially in adults, is extremely underrepresented in literature. And you typically do not see autistic characters as being parents. And if you do, they're typically male parents. The book does include some darker themes, but it does so because I wanted to accurately represent what it's like to be a non-male autistic individual. Did you know that 9 out of 10 autistic women experience sexual assault? 9 out of 10. That's 90% of autistic women experience sexual assault. And that is for a variety of reasons, because women experience sexual assault too often anyways, but then you add the over-trusting and the difficulty reading facial expressions and the ability to take people at their word, and it can lead to situations where you are compromised. Also, autistic individuals are seen as victims. They're more likely to be bullied, and with non-males, that can lead to sexual assault. So sexual assault is extremely real for many many autistic non-male individuals. And so when I was deciding to write this book, I did make the decision to include sexual assault in this book because to not do so to me was not representative of this population. It also is very real to my own experience. Um, I used personal experience from multiple incidents to influence the scene that I wrote in Between, where there is an off-screen rape. Um, and I so it came from a very real, a very emotional place. It was definitely not meant to just be there for the sake of being there. It was there because this is a very real reality for non-male autistic individuals. Parenting as autistic is also very different, and parenting styles of autistic parents can be seen as very negative instead of just different. I wanted to show this being recognized and appreciated. Alicia's son Kenny actually comes out and says some of the positive things about having an autistic mother, and I wanted that to be in there because just because the way Alicia acts and responds and some of the decisions she makes may not be neurotypical doesn't mean that they're invalid. There are also a lot of the experiences that happened in this book came from a very real place also. So I have 3 children of my own, 2 with autism and 1 with a mental health diagnosis. And I have experienced a lot of situations with the school, and I have actually toned them down to make them more believable, and then at my editor's request toned them down even more and put them in this book. And so there's one point where Kenny goes missing for like the 3rd time, and Alicia is like feels targeted by the school because she feels like the school is just like targeting her as an autistic mother, based upon some of the things that they have said to her, some of the harassment and bullying that they have given to her, ableism across the board. And so they take hours to call her and then don't even get to the point, and then it's like the 3rd time it's happened, and she doesn't want to lose her job, which is another reality for single parents, especially with single parents of special needs kids. And while Kenny is not autistic, his magic makes for a unique situation, and I kind of mirrored that. If you're constantly being called by the school and you're trying to provide for the only income for your family, it's this balancing act between protecting your kids and not getting fired. Because trust me, not getting fired while parenting special needs kids is extremely difficult and a very, very real reality. And for single parents across the board, some of the comments that I personally have received are extreme. And again, I toned them down for the book. Um, so I wish that this wasn't based on reality, but there's definitely points of reality in here. So one actual experience is that one of my kids went missing at school for more than 4 hours, and the school never called me. I actually found out by arriving at the school and not being able to find my kid. Um, that not that specific situation, but other situations have happened multiple times. And I wish that it wasn't true, but it really was. I came up to school, my kid, they didn't know where my kid was. They had been looking for them. Um, they had actually sent my kid out of school to be babysat by their cousin in another classroom and didn't know where they were. We had to call the police, look for them. It took hours to finally locate them. And it was a very real, a very scary situation, and it was not the only one. And so I guess part of this book, maybe I am criticizing the schools because based upon my experience, I've had some really not great experience with the schools. And I had to tone that down to make it more believable. But I think other autistic parents have reached out to me after reading this and have shared similar situations and just how hard it is sometimes to be seen as an autistic parent while raising a kid. So I wrote in between for autistic individuals. I did not write it for neurotypicals. That was a definite choice. When I wrote it, I wanted it to be as relatable for autistic individuals as possible because almost every book out there is written for neurotypicals and almost no books are written for autistic individuals. And so that was a very conscientious choice. So some of the things may not be as relatable to neurotypical individuals, but I hope that autistic individuals do find them relatable. Um, but overall, this is a fantasy book, so it may be based upon some of my own experience, but it's fiction. Um, but I hope that this book resonates with some individuals, and I do know, to feedback people have given me that it has. And so that makes me, I don't know, that means a lot to me when people reach out and say, hey, thank you for seeing this part represented on page. Because I know I seek out books where I can feel represented as well. The immortal part of myself is a different story. I wanted to create a coming of age story for an adult who did not have a safe space to find themselves when they were younger. And then, again, this is partly based upon my own experience. Some of the incidents that happen in Riley's childhood were unfortunately based upon actual experience for myself. Also, I I had children really young. I was 20 when my first child was born, and all three of my children were born within 5 years of each other. Again, two are autistic, one has mental health diagnosis, and as a single parent, the next 20 years of my life was devoted to my children, and rightfully, absolutely so. But there was this weird dynamic when they didn't need me anymore, and it was great. It was very successful and rewarding as a parent to be like, cool, my kids don't need me anymore. But then I found myself trying to find my own identity, and so this theme that you see in a lot of YA novels, I was then having that my own coming of age story, but I was 40 years old. And that's when I started transitioning, when I started to kind of develop my own identity that I didn't have growing up the way I grew up and then having children younger. And so while I was going through that process, I wrote the immortal part of myself. And then I added in a lot of social commentary as well. Um, the autism representation in this book, I think I put a lot of interplay between how society wants to take advantage of autistic individuals. They want our strength and the positive aspects of being autistic, but don't want us to act too autistic. They want us to mask, they want us to fit into society and do everything to make ourselves fit society while still taking advantage of all our gifts. And I think this became even more prevalent during the pandemic, where for like, a short period of time, I know a lot of autistic individuals felt like things got easier. Things became more online. We didn't have to go outside as much, do as much. The interaction became different. Instead of communicating in person, having to try and figure out body communication, communicating on Zoom, where it was more of an even playing field. And I know that I'm not the only one that experienced this. I've seen conversations all over the internet about it. And then um, the pushback from neurotypicals of like, oh no, that was too hard for me. Now things need to go back to normal. And yet the normal was that autistic individuals needed to adapt completely again to neurotypical worlds. And yet at the same time, neurotypicals want the advantages that come with being neurodivergent. I know in my day job, I do my day job because of my autism, not in spite of my autism. Um, I know that autistic individuals are often underemployed, um, but but that has more to do with difficulty in socially navigating uh, the socially navigating the complexities of business world. But when we have a skill set, that companies are more than happy to exploit that. But they want us to utilize that skill set while still fitting into this neurotypical cultural uh, norm. And I wanted to put a little bit of that and show that into the immortal part of myself. But I do think in the third novel that I'm working on, Neurodivergent, that is actually going to be a much major theme into it. And that is where that novel actually stemmed from. A conversation between that was I was having with others on the internet, but also with my own my youngest child. And so I do think a lot of myself have gone into my novels. I definitely have put a lot of autism into my novels because I just don't see it elsewhere, and I want to show that representation for others, and that's because that's how I perceive the world. That being said, that I do have, so I'm working on my third novel, and I'm having planned out uh, my fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh novel, which I'm trying to make into a series. And I do think that while autism is going to be prevalent in those stories, that it's not necessarily going to be like the main focus in every one of those stories. There may just be side characters and such, and I may bring other areas up to the forefront for other representation for other characters. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to play out, but I think as I continue to grow as an author, I can represent to autistic readers without necessarily having every main character be autistic. But I still don't want to lose that representation in my books. Um, so that is my journey so far with being an autistic author. I would love to know your thoughts. Your thoughts on reading autistic works, your thoughts on any of my books that you have read, your thoughts on being autistic, and your thoughts on being neurotypical and approaching a book written by an autistic author. So, as always, keep reading, keep writing, and until next time.